Hello, my name is Jessica from Sweet Quilt Shop, and today we're going to be working on block 3 of the $8 Quilt Club. Okay, I'm ready to do step 1 in this block 3, and I'm going to use my bigger rectangle pieces that are the background, and you should have 4 of these this size. And I'm going to use my 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares that are print 3. So if you're doing the modern, these are red. If you're doing the traditional, I'm not sure what color that is, but it should be print 3. On the backs of all of my squares, I'm going to draw a diagonal line, just like that. So go ahead and do that to all 8 of your squares. I have drawn all my lines on the print 3 squares, and so now what we're going to do is make flying geese. And so how they have you do this is we're just going to sew a line right on that line that we drew. So I'm going to do that as a chain stitch, so I'm going to go along on every line. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot, which is a little bit difficult to do on here, but it is working. Okay, so I have all those sewn together. Sewn all these together, and so now what we're going to do is cut off. Don't cut this side, you're going to cut this side. And just cutting to about 1/4 inch of that line you drew. So you have something that looks like that. This piece we don't need, so it looks like this. I'll show you again, cutting off that side. Okay, so now I have 4 pieces that look like that. Okay, now we're going to iron these open, like so. Got them all ironed, and now we're going to take those other pieces that we drew lines on. We're going to set them on the other side, like this, and I'm going to stitch on this line. Does this ever happen to you?
Hello, 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 hello.
This.
Me, and Moda, woo, woo, woo. Oh, da, 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 ba, da, da, da.
So I'm going to do this on all 4 of these pieces. Okay, I sewed the squares on the other side, so now I have a piece that looks like this. You should have 4 of them. We're going to do the same thing to this side we did on the other. We're just going to cut this extra off. So now it looks like this. And that's our flying geese unit. Okay, so now just like we did before, we're going to iron these open, and we might have to trim them up a little bit. They should measure 6.5 by 3.5 when you're done. So just even them up so they measure that. So you can see we have created the flying geese units. So I put the outside of our block. I just have laid them out. I haven't sewn anything together yet. So now we need to create that middle piece. So the first thing I wanted to show you is when your pattern says to cut twice diagonally, what they're saying is to cut it both ways. So here's the background piece, and your pattern actually says to cut it diagonally. So we're going to do that now. So all I did was cut it one way and flip my ruler, and I'm going to cut it the other way. So what that gives you then is 4 triangles. So I'm going to do the same thing on the print 3, and your pattern tells you to do this. Okay, now what the pattern doesn't tell you to do is on your print 2, your 3 7/8 squares, you should have 2 of these. You need to cut these diagonally 1 time. So I just stacked mine together on top of each other, and you're just going to cut it 1 time. Just like that. Okay, so now we have all of our triangles that we need. The next step in your block is you're going to take those little triangle pieces and set them together like this. And it shows you a picture in the pattern how to do that. So the long sides are facing out. And we're going to sew those together. And you're just using a 1/4 inch seam. You saw me do this earlier. This is just a little starter fabric. Sometimes your machine will run better if you use a little starter piece. And then you can just slip in your piece right in there. Okay, so I'm going to do that 4 times. Okay, so I should have 4 pieces here. I'm going to cut them apart. Okay, now we're just going to iron these. We're just ironing them open like that. See my seam there on the back. Okay, so you're going to do that with all 4 of your pieces, and then we're going to sew this triangle onto there. So like I said earlier, I ironed all these, and I'm just going to sew this triangle onto there, just like that. You're going to do this 4 times also. I'm going to get my little starter fabric. See how my thread's sucked up inside my machine? If that happens with yours, what you need to make sure you do every time is to start needle down. and hold on to that thread when you start stitching. This is not the machine that I use all the time, and so I forget that. So I've just re-threaded it here. Okay, so I'm going to start needle down and see how I'm kind of holding on to my thread when I get started. Just like that. Okay. So now I'm going to sew these. Okay, and I'm doing this 4 times. This is how we're creating that pinwheel that's in the middle of your block. Okay, I've sewn all of these, and so they look like this. I'm just going to iron them. Just ironing that seam to one side, as you can see there. Okay, and then these squares should measure 3.5 by 3.5. So you want to make sure that that's what they measure, and you'll want to cut off these little dog ears here. So we'll trim all those off like that, and then we're going to square up this block to 3.5 by 3.5. So I trimmed up all my pieces, and here's my square, my 3.5-inch square. So I'm just laying those together. Your pattern shows you how to do this. And then that creates that pinwheel. So I'm going to sew these 2 pieces together and these 2, and then I'm going to sew those 2 rows together. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I'm sewing the top rows. Just using a 1/4-inch seam. Okay, so I sewed the top rows together and the bottom rows together, and I'm going to iron this. It's very important to iron your seams as you go. That'll make your block lay nicely, and your seams all going the same direction. Okay, so now I'm just going to iron those, or sew these together. This is when I like to use my little purple thing. Keep forgetting to have a starter fabric. Makes a world of difference on this machine. Okay, so right there in that middle you have a pretty hefty seam there. And so I like to use my purple thing to get those laid down nice as it goes through the machine. And kind of feed it through. There you go. So there is my middle pinwheel block. Okay, now right here in the middle where everything met, it's pretty thick. So what you can do is you can iron those open so they lay nice. There's a couple different things you can do. You can iron them open, or you can just go in here and clip these little seams, and that'll make it open up just right there in the middle. Your long arm quilter will be happy if you do that. then she will not, or he will not break needles when they go over your thick seams. So here's my block all laid out, and so I'm just going to sew my rows together. So I'm going to sew this row together, this row together, and this row together. Okay, so I sewed the rows together, and now I'm going to sew those together. So I'll start here and sew this one together, and then I'll sew the other one on top of that. So here's block 3 complete. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.